Once upon a time, there was a mighty and great emperor who had a beautiful garden next to his palace. The garden was rich with flowers and meticulously arranged, unlike anything ever seen before. At the very end of this garden stood an apple tree that bore golden apples. However, since the emperor had owned it, he had never been able to taste a single ripe apple. Every time the apples blossomed, grew, and ripened, someone would come at night and steal them just before they were ready to be picked. Despite stationing the best guards and the most skilled soldiers to watch over the tree, no one had ever been able to catch the thief. Eventually, the emperor's eldest son came forward.
Father, I have grown up in your palace and have walked through this garden countless times. I have admired the beautiful fruit on that tree, but I have never been able to taste even one. Now that the apples are ripening, grant me permission to stand guard at night. I swear I will catch the thief who robs us.
The emperor sighed and replied,
My dear son, so many strong men have kept watch and accomplished nothing. I long to have even a single golden apple on my table, for this tree has cost me a fortune. Very well, I will let you try, though I have little hope that you will succeed.
The prince set up watch for an entire week. He stayed awake at night and rested during the day. But one morning he returned to his father, sad and ashamed, and confessed,
Father, I watched until midnight, but then a great drowsiness overcame me, and I could no longer stand on my feet. Soon after, I fell into a deep sleep, like the dead, and did not wake until the sun was high in the sky. When I checked the tree, the apples were gone.
The emperor was deeply disappointed, but had no choice but to wait another year. When the time came again, the second son begged for a chance to guard the tree, promising to succeed where his older brother had failed. But he too succumbed to sleep, and the golden apples were stolen once more. Now the emperor was so frustrated that he considered cutting down the tree entirely. But his youngest son, Prâslea, came to him and pleaded,
Father, you have kept this tree for so many years, despite all the troubles it has caused you. Please allow me to guard it this year and try my luck.
Nonsense!
The emperor scoffed.
Your older brothers, along with so many strong and experienced men, have all failed. What makes you think that you, a mere child, could succeed? Don't you hear what happened to your brothers? There must be magic involved.
I do not promise to catch the thief, but I believe it is worth trying. What harm could come from one more attempt?
The emperor relented and agreed to spare the tree for another year. Spring came, and the tree blossomed more beautifully than ever before, bearing even more fruit than in previous years. The emperor marveled at the sight, but his joy was overshadowed by the thought that he might never taste its golden apples. Meanwhile, Prâslea often walked through the garden, carefully studying the tree and forming a plan. When the apples began to ripen, he told his father,
The time has come. I will stand guard tonight.
Go then, but I am certain you will return defeated like your brothers.
For me, it will not be such a disgrace. After all, I am the youngest and have made no boastful promises. I only wish to try.
That evening, he went to the garden, carrying books to read, 2 sharp stakes, a bow, and a quiver of arrows. He chose a spot near the tree, drove the stakes into the ground, one in front of him and one behind. That way, if he dozed off, his chin would hit the front stake, and if he leaned backward, his head would hit the one behind, keeping him awake. He watched all night, and sometime after midnight a gentle breeze filled the air with a sweet fragrance, lulling him into drowsiness. But the stakes worked as planned, jolting him awake. He remained alert until, just before dawn, he heard a faint rustling in the garden. Keeping his eyes fixed on the tree, he readied his bow. The rustling grew louder, and soon he saw a figure climbing the branches. He let loose an arrow, then another, and with the third shot, he heard a pained groan. Silence followed. As morning broke, Prâslea picked a few golden apples, placed them on a golden platter, and took them to his father. Never had the emperor felt such joy as when he finally held the golden apples he had long desired.
Now we must find the thief.
But the emperor, now satisfied, no longer cared about the thief. However, Prâslea insisted, pointing out the trail of blood leading from the tree.
I will follow this trail. Even if it leads to the ends of the earth, I will bring the thief back to you.
The very next day he spoke with his brothers and convinced them to join him on the journey. Though they agreed, they secretly envied Prâslea for his success and plotted against him. They followed the blood trail until it led them into a vast wilderness. There, at the edge of a deep chasm, the trail vanished. They circled the abyss and confirmed that the thief must have fallen inside.
How shall we descend?
They wondered. They ordered thick ropes to be brought and prepared a pulley system. The eldest brother went down first, but after a short descent, he panicked and signaled to be pulled back up. The second brother tried, but fared no better.
Now it is my turn. Lower me carefully, and when I tug on the rope, let me down further. Once the rope stops moving, set guards to watch over it. If you see it shaking violently, pull me up.
His brothers obeyed, lowering him deeper and deeper into the abyss. Eventually, they felt the rope slacken, indicating he had reached the bottom. Once on the ground, Prâslea looked around in awe. Everything here was different. The trees, the flowers, the creatures. Summoning his courage, he followed a path until he reached a palace made entirely of copper. At its entrance, he was met by a beautiful young woman who exclaimed,
"Thank God I got to see a man from our land again. How did you get here, brother?" "This is the domain of 3 ogre brothers who kidnapped us from our parents. We are 3 sisters, daughters of an emperor from the land where you come from."
Then he briefly told her the whole story about the golden apples, how he wounded the thief, and how he followed the trail of blood to the pit through which he descended to her. He then asked her what kind of beings those ogres were and whether they were strong. She told him that each of the ogres had chosen one of them and kept forcing them to marry, but they kept resisting with all sorts of demands, asking for things as rare as the moon and the sun. The ogres went to great lengths to fulfill their every wish.
"They are indeed strong, but with God's will, perhaps you will defeat them. But for now, hide somewhere. Oh my, if the ogre finds you in his house, it will be terrible. He is fierce and turns into a raging lion. Now is the time when he is about to return for lunch, and he has the habit of throwing his mace from a mile away. It hits the door and the table, then settles into its place."
She had barely finished speaking when they heard a whistling sound, a loud bang at the door and the table, and then the mace appeared and settled into its spot. But Prâslea caught the mace and threw it back, sending it even farther than the ogre had, striking him on the shoulders. Startled, the ogre stopped in his tracks, looked at the mace, picked it up, and returned home. When he reached the gate, he started shouting,
I smell human flesh from the other realm. What wind has brought you here, man? You have come only for your bones to remain in a foreign land.
I have come to capture the thieves of my father's golden apples.
We are the ones,
said the ogre.
How shall we fight? With maces, with swords, or in a wrestling match?
In a wrestling match, for it is the fairest way.
They grabbed each other and wrestled fiercely. They struggled until the ogre pushed Prâslea into the ground up to his ankles. But Prâslea gathered his strength, lifted the ogre, and threw him down, burying him in the ground up to his knees, and then he swiftly cut off his head. The girl, with tears in her eyes, thanked him for saving her from the ogre, and begged him to have mercy on her sisters as well. After resting for a couple of days, he set out, following the girl's guidance, to find her middle sister, who lived in a silver palace. There, just like with the eldest sister, he was received with joy. The girl begged him to hide, but he refused. When the ogre's mace arrived, thrown from 2 miles away, Prâslea threw it back even farther, striking the ogre on the head. The furious ogre rushed home, fought Prâslea just like his elder brother had, and met the same fate. He was slain. The girl, after thanking him, gave him instructions on how to rescue their youngest sister.
With God's help, and given that he is still weakened from the wound you inflicted on him when he tried to steal the apples, I believe you can defeat him.
For an entire week, they enjoyed each other's company, and after Prâslea had recovered from his battles, he set off for the third ogre. When he saw the golden palace where the youngest sister was held, he hesitated for a moment, but then took courage and entered. As soon as she saw him, the girl pleaded with him like she would with God to free her from the ogre. She said that as soon as he recovered fully, he was determined to force her into marriage, no matter what. She had barely finished speaking when the mace struck the door and the table, and then settled into its place. Prâslea asked about the ogre's strength, and she told him that he could throw his mace 3 miles away. So Prâslea threw it even farther, hitting the ogre in the chest. The enraged ogre immediately rushed home.
Who dares trespass on my land and enter my house?
It is I.
If it is you, I shall punish you severely for your audacity. You may have come here as you wished, but you shall not leave as you please.
With God's help, I have a way to deal with you.
They agreed to fight fairly, and they fought, and they fought, all through the summer day, until nightfall. At noon, they turned into blazing fires, battling furiously, while a crow kept circling above them, cawing. Seeing him, the ogre said,
Raven, Raven, take some tallow in your claws and spread it over me, and I will give you this carcass.
Raven, Raven, if you spread tallow over me, I will give you 3 carcasses.
Oh, if only God would send such a feast my way, I would be able to feed my entire nest.
My words are true.
Without hesitation, the raven brought tallow in its claws, spread it over the brave Prâslea, and he gained more strength. In the evening, the ogre turned to the emperor's daughter, who was watching them fight after they had returned to their human forms.
My beautiful one, give me a little water to cool myself, and I promise we shall wed tomorrow.
My beautiful one, give me water, and I promise to take you to our land and marry you there.
May God hear your words, brave one, and fulfill your wish.
The emperor's daughter gave Prâslea water to drink, and he grew even stronger. Then he grabbed the ogre in his arms, lifted him up, and when he let go, he drove him into the ground up to his knees. The ogre, gathering his strength, lifted Prâslea, and upon dropping him, buried him up to his waist. Summoning all his power, Prâslea squeezed the ogre once more, making his bones crack, and then, mustering all his might, he threw him down with such force that he buried him up to his neck, and immediately cut off his head. The rescued princesses, overjoyed, gathered around him, embraced, and kissed him, saying,
From now on, you shall be our brother.
They then told him that each of the ogre's palaces contained a whip. If struck in the four corners, it would produce magical apples. They followed this advice, and each princess obtained an apple. They then prepared to return to their land. Upon reaching the pit, they shook the rope against the walls. The guards above understood the signal and began to pull up the rope. They first lifted the eldest princess with her bronze apple. Upon reaching the surface, she presented a note from Prâslea, stating that she was to marry his eldest brother. Her joy was immeasurable when she saw herself back in her homeland. The rope was lowered again, and the second princess was pulled up with her silver apple and another note, designating her as the wife of the middle brother. Once more, the rope was sent down, and the youngest princess, Prâslea's betrothed, was lifted up. However, she did not give away her golden apple, but kept it for herself. Prâslea had sensed his brother's treachery, so before they could pull him up, he tied a stone to the rope and placed his hat on top to test them. When his brothers saw the hat, thinking it was him, they loosened the rope, letting it drop rapidly, convinced that Prâslea had perished. They then took the princesses to the emperor, feigning sorrow for their youngest brother's demise, and married them as Prâslea had decreed. However, the youngest princess refused to marry anyone else. Prâslea, who remained trapped below, saw the stone crash down and thanked God for sparing his life. He pondered how to escape. As he was lamenting, he heard cries of distress that filled his heart with sorrow. Looking around, he saw a dragon climbing a tree to devour some young griffin chicks. Prâslea drew his sword, rushed at the dragon, and swiftly cut it to pieces. The chicks, seeing their savior, thanked him and said,
Brave man, come. Let us hide you, for if our mother sees you, she might swallow you out of joy.
They pulled out one of their feathers and hid him within it. When the griffin mother arrived and saw the remains of the slain dragon, she asked her chicks,
Who did this great deed?
Mother, it was a man from the other land, and he went eastward.
I must go and thank him, she said.
She flew off in that direction, but soon returned empty-handed.
Tell me truly, where did he go?
Westward, mother.
The griffin scoured the land, but found no one. Finally, she demanded the truth from her chicks.
If we show him to you, mother, do you promise not to harm him?
I promise, my dear ones.
The chicks then revealed Prâslea. The griffin, overjoyed, embraced him, almost swallowing him in her excitement, had the chicks not intervened.
How may I reward you for saving my children?
Carry me back to my homeland.
That is a difficult task, but because I owe you my chicks' salvation, I agree. Prepare 100 pounds of meat, cut into 1-pound pieces, and 100 loaves of bread.
Prâslea gathered the provisions and brought them to the mouth of the pit. The griffin instructed him.
Sit on my back with the supplies. Every time I turn my head, feed me a loaf of bread and a piece of meat.
He obeyed, feeding her each time she asked. But as they neared the surface, she turned her head again, and Prâslea realized that the food had run out. Without hesitation, he drew his sword, cut a piece of flesh from his thigh, and gave it to the griffin. Upon reaching solid ground, Prâzlea found himself unable to walk. The griffin then said,
Had it not been for the kindness you showed and my chicks' pleas, I would have eaten you. I sensed that the last piece of meat was sweeter than the rest, so I did not swallow it. You did wrong by offering it.
She then regurgitated the piece of flesh, placed it back on his leg, smeared it with her saliva, and it healed completely. They embraced and parted ways. The griffin returned to her chasm, and Prâslea set off toward his father's kingdom. Disguised in peasant rags, Prâslea learned from travelers that his brothers had married the princesses he had rescued, as he had decreed, and that his parents were in deep mourning. The youngest princess refused to wed, and remained in mourning. His brothers had now found her a handsome suitor, forcing her to marry. Determined, Prâslea entered the city and learned that she had demanded a golden spinning distaff that could spin by itself, just as the ogre had given her. The emperor ordered the royal silversmith to craft it within 3 weeks, or he would lose his life. Prâslea joined the silversmith as an apprentice, and, after gaining his trust, produced the magical distaff, which he had taken from the ogre's golden apple. The emperor was astonished, but the princess immediately recognized it, realizing that Prâslea had survived. She then requested a golden hen with chicks, which Prâslea also provided. Finally, she demanded that the craftsman who made them be brought before her. When Prâslea was revealed, she recognized him at once and embraced him. His parents, too, recognized their lost son. Prâslea forgave his treacherous brothers, but divine justice prevailed. When they shot arrows skyward, theirs fell upon their heads, killing them, while Prâslea's fell harmlessly at his feet. After mourning his brothers, Prâslea and the youngest princess wed in a grand celebration, and the kingdom rejoiced in their happiness.